Okay, next I'd like to move on to the conditional starter sheet within this workbook. So we're going to click on the conditional starter sheet, move on over here, and again, like I said, in every sheet you want to make sure that you know who the author is and what purpose the sheet is for. So I'm going to add my name in here. The class and then the date. And then again, my problem statement here, and we're going to introduce conditionals and nested conditionals using both logical and relational operators in our if statements. Again, I'm going to highlight row 1 and then do a Control B to make it bold, or you can come up here and turn it all bold, and I'm going to turn this second one, so Control I, italics for row 2, so that it is my little header at the top of my spreadsheet. So now I'm going to kind of explain this sheet a little. So I'm going to zoom in here to this first set of tables. And so initially this sheet, it was produced to help schools make choices on cereals about what to serve in the morning for free and reduced lunches. So students get free breakfast when they show up to school, and so this allows them to figure out what they're supposed to serve each day of the week. And so here we have our breakfast cereal choices that are coordinated to both a numerical value and an acronym for the day of the week, M, T, W, T, H, and F for Monday through Friday, or 1 through 5 for Monday through Friday, and then the corresponding cereal that goes with that number and letter. And so here in B12, this is designated as a user's choice, and so they're going to input a number here. And so if I put a 2 here and hit enter, what I want to happen is in B13, I want the serial name to output based on what the corresponding serial name is for option 2 out of this first menu. So if I put a 1 here in B12, in B13, the word Cheerios should populate. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a set of conditional statements to help us essentially code this in our Excel spreadsheet. So I want you to remember the syntax for our conditional statements here out of the previously recorded lectures. So our if statements, our conditional statements usually are our formula, which contains an if here. And if, in our first part of our if statement, we need to designate what the condition is to be met. And so in this case, when we start here, and I'm going to move this so that we can see our full slide. So here in B13, we're going to start with equals if. And so what is that logical test that we're doing? Well, we're testing to see what the user inputted versus what values occur here in this top breakfast cereal choice table that occurs in A5 through C10. So if the user inputs in B12, and that is equal to the value found in, say, A6, regardless of what number is inputted in A6, we know that if what is entered in B12 is equal to A6, then we're going to output a value. So this is our condition to be met. So whatever is inputted here in B12, if it matches what's in A6, then we're going to output the serial name from C6. But if it's not that option, so we put our, so what happens if it's false? Well, if it's false, we end up with 4 more options to program here. And so in this case, we're looking at not simple conditional statements, but we're looking at complex or nested conditional statements. So if it's true, we're outputting something here in our Excel spreadsheet. But if it's false, we're asking a second question. Well, our second question in this case is B12 equal to the next value in our table here? So we need to start with another if statement. So if B12 is equal to whatever occurs in A7, then we're going to go back to our little algorithm here. Then we're going to output whatever is the corresponding value. So in this case, we're going to output what's in C7. But if that's false, we still have more options to go. And so you can continue to nest in this algorithmic fashion even further. So here, I'm going to do another if statement. So our if B12 is equal to whatever is in A8, and this allows us that whatever is in A8, we could change that number to be 7, say if we had to swap out what our serial was, and if the user chose 7, it would still be an option that's available to them and show up properly. And so here, the other way to output what the name of the cereal is instead of using the cell reference to that cereal, we could also hard code by entering in corn pops as the corresponding value. But what happens here is, say they ran out of corn pops on Wednesday and they aren't getting a shipment for at least 2 weeks, and they need to replace this with a cereal that they have in stock. They could come into this spreadsheet and change the name, but if this is hard-coded to corn pops, it's going to tell them to select corn pops, and now they don't have corn pops in stock, so they don't know what to replace it with. So we prefer not to hard code in our spreadsheets, and we want to constantly use our cell references. So in this case, I'm going to input C8 to cell reference to corn pops or whatever may be occurring in this cell. So that allows the school to make changes to the spreadsheet without having to impact the user much, because we're using all cell references to output our values. So we've got a couple more options that we've still got to code in here. So if B12 is equal to A9, then we're going to output C9. And if it's not C9, then it's got to be the last option in our table. So in our false statement, we're going to output C10. And so now that I've finished all of those nested if statements, I'm going to close out by ending all of my parentheses. And you're going to see that each parenthesis that I added changed a different color. So when I added my first one, this green matches this last if statement here, the starting parenthesis. And so now I add a purple, so it closes out this second to last if statement, closing out my red if statement, and then closing out my very first if statement. So when you've got a black parenthesis at the very end, it means you've closed out all of the statements. And so now you can hit enter, and when I have a 1 in here, Cheerios comes out. If I change this to 5 and hit enter, so I re-enter a value in B12, I should get an updated. What happens when I enter a 7? When I entered a 7, my serial name did not change from Rice Chex. So why does that happen? So when we think about this, we've defaulted that only 1 through 4 can be designated, and if it's anything other than 1 through 4, we're always going to output Rice Chex. So even if a user inputs a wrong number, it's always going to default to Rice Chex. So what we need to do is come back into our nested if statement, and in reality, because we've got 5 options here, we really have 6 options, because if they enter something incorrectly, we want it to output maybe an error, or say choose again, or something to help them realize that they inputted something incorrectly. And so I'm going to come back into the end of my statement here. And so I'm going to add at the end of B12 equals A9, so where that green if statement, I'm going to add in another if statement to make it so you need an if statement for one less value than you have options. So in this case, because we said we have 6 options here, we need 5 if statements. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if statements. So it's kind of like this light violet color is our parenthesis here. So if B12 is equal to 5, or whatever is contained in A10, then we're going to output rice checks. But if it doesn't come out to be something out of our menu, we're going to say choose again to let them know that there was an error. Or we could say error, choose again, indicating a 1 through 5, because those are the options that we've given them. I close out all of my parentheses statements, and you notice these parentheses here around my 1 through 5 are within my quotation, so it's using that as text versus a parenthesis on my function when I close out my functions here. Okay, and so while my statement's too long, it doesn't really show up properly. It gets cut off. So I may come back to my statement and just say choose again, number 1 through 5, so that with a 7, they know that they're supposed to select a 1 through 5. So I come in here and I do a 3, and my error message goes away when I enter 3 in B12 and hit enter. So Corn Pops now comes up. We can do the same thing with our day of the week. So here, we need to output our serial name based on our day of our week. Well, what I could do is I could really come up here. I've already got the whole structure built. And I can click in here and just click on cell B13. Don't double click into it or click into the formula bar, but just click on the cell and then hit Control C to copy it, and I could paste this here. But when I do that, I ended up with a 0 because it doesn't know what I'm referencing, because now all of my cells have shifted due to my cell addressing. So while I'm looking at B15 here as my conditions, I no longer start in A6, I end up starting in A9. So here, my A6 and C6, A7, C7, these are all absolute cell references. So I can come in here, change all of these into absolute cell references, because we don't want these values to change if we were to copy and paste this. So once I update all of those, so now all of my cell references within my table are held absolute. So if I were to copy this out and paste it, my error message now says choose again for a 1 through 5. And right now it has an error message because I have nothing entered in my day of the week. So if I change this to a T in cell B15 and I update this, why is it still saying choose again? Well, it's saying choose again because I designated this by numbers, not by the day of the week. So I can drag all of these cell references over to their corresponding, quit making mistakes here. So take these all over to their corresponding day of the week. So now my references are B6, not A6, B7 instead of A7, B8 instead of A8, and so on for all of my choices. So now with my T for Tuesday, Cocoa Krispies pops up. So let's complicate this a little bit further. So let's come down to the bottom set of tables here. And so we've kind of got two tables within a single table. So we have our daily cereal goal, whether we want a healthy cereal or a sugar cereal. And then we have our breakfast cereal choices, which are designated by a number, but here's our name of our cereal, but they're also designated by a healthy designation or a sugar designation for each of the types of cereals. And so on Mondays, we want a healthy cereal. On Tuesday, a sugar cereal. Friday is the other healthy day. Wednesdays and Thursdays are both sugar cereals. So we can choose Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are sugar, Monday and Fridays are healthy. And we can choose our cereal choice. So if we have a healthy day, we're either going to choose Cheerios or Rice Chex to serve. So we could say on Monday, we're going to serve Rice Chex. And on Friday, we could also serve Rice Chex. Or we can switch it up and serve Cheerios. And so we have a day of the week that the user is going to input. And then you're going to tell them what type of cereal that day of the week corresponds to, whether it's healthy or sugary. And then based on that, we're going to tell them what number to choose from, whether if it's healthy, it ends up being numbers 1 and 2. If it's sugary, it's going to be options 3, 4, or 5. And they're going to choose a number, 1 through 5. And if they choose correctly, we want the cereal name to pop out in cell B33. But if it doesn't choose, if they don't choose correctly, we want an error message to pop up in cells C32, which is also merged with D32. But we'll call it by its first cell reference, C32. And we would not want the cereal name to pop up. So we're going to code all of this in Excel so we can make some of these complicated decisions very easily for a user. So here, I'm just going to input an M for Monday so that we can start our coding within our Excel. And so here, based on my Monday, the type of cereal is going to end up being an H for healthy. So for our if statement, so if B30 is equal to an M for Monday, it's going to output an H for healthy. But what other day of the week is designated as healthy? So I already said Fridays are our other healthy day. So how do we get both of these so that they output an H for healthy? We can use our OR. So with those conditional statements, our logical operator of OR, so we can choose one or the other, and they're both going to output healthy. And so we need our second logical here. So if B30 or B30 is equal to F or A28 for Friday, then we're in our true statement. So if either of these are true, we're going to output an H for healthy. Else, what are we putting if it's false? Well, the only other option Monday through Friday is sugary, so we could potentially say that everything else is sugary. But what happens if we don't put something in here? Or if we choose like an ampersand to go in there, or we enter a number, it's still going to tell us sugary when that may not be the case. So we need to put in and edit our statement to be that nested conditional. So here we need that second question. So if, and now we have 3 choices for our sugary cereals. So these 3, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, are all sugary. So if B30 is equal to Tuesday, A25, or B30 is equal to A26 for Wednesday, or B30 is equal to A27, designating Thursday, then we're going to output that value of S for a sugary cereal. Else, oh, I forgot my or in here, so my logical test is off here, so I need to add my or to indicate my different choices here, so that now my S is in my true statement. And I want everything else to show up as a blank cell. So I'm going to add the double quotations indicating a blank cell. And then I'm going to close out my first or my second if statement, close out my first if statement, and hit enter. So now if I incorrectly enter something, I ended up with 2 if statements for essentially 3 options. So my first if statement is my healthy, my second if statement is my sugary, and if it's neither of those, so what is outputted here in this false to statement is a blank cell. We want nothing to show up if they input something incorrectly. So here, Monday, I get a healthy cereal. If I input T for Tuesday, I get sugary. And so here, we want to output a statement for the user based on the type of cereal to tell them what to choose. So we use our conditionals again. So if B31 is equal to that S for sugary, then we're going to tell them to choose 3, 4, or 5 for their options, because those are the numbers that are designated here as our sugary cereals. Otherwise, if B31 is an H for healthy, then we're going to tell them to choose 1 or 2 as their option. But what happens if that's false? We're just going to leave this as a blank to let them know that if they inputted it something incorrectly for day of the week, their type is going to be blank, therefore this message to them should also be blank. So right now, as Tuesday, I get a sugary cereal in cell B31, and in C31, I end up getting a choose 3 or 4 3, 4, or 5 to tell the user to input 3, 4, or 5 here? Well, if I change this to M, my type of cereal updates to H for healthy, and my message now to the user is to choose 1 or 2. So here I enter a 1, and if my 1 shows up, then it should display my cereal name. But what happens if I enter a 4 here? I don't want my serial name in cell B33 to show up, and I want an error message to display that tells the user to choose again. So here, I'm basing this error message on 2 different things, or really if 2 things are matching up. So based on the type of cereal and the user's choice. And so here, we need to use that and because they have to choose correctly in both. So looking at those logical operators, the and only returns a true value if they are all true versus a false if one of the choices is false. So if you have healthy here, you want this to be entered as a 1 or 2. So if they have an H in B31, you want the user's choice in B32 to be 1 or 2. So let's start there. So if B31 is equal to H and we want B32 equal to 1 or B32 equal to 2, but I have to remember to put my OR because these are 2 options here. So I'm going to put my OR in before my B32 to indicate I need an and an OR in my condition. And if those are both true, so I've got all of my logical conditions there, then what happens? So if it's healthy and they've chosen 1 or 2, then we're going to output nothing because they've chosen correctly. What happens if it's sugary and they choose correctly? So again, same structure. I need my if statement first. So if and B31 is equal to an S and B32 is equal to 3 or B32 is equal to 4 or B32 is equal to 5. So saying it's a sugary cereal and they've inputted a 3, 4, or 5 in cell B32, then we want nothing to display. But for everything else, we want to tell the user to choose again. We're going to end out our 2 if statements to close out our formula. So in this case, I have Monday designated in B30 as the day of the week, which is a healthy cereal. We're telling the user to choose 1 or 2 in C31. And our user has inputted a 4, meaning they've done something wrong. And now an error message says choose again. We don't want our cereal choice to show up. But if I put a 2 in here, my error message in C32 ends up going away. So our last part of this sheet is now to have, if they've done these 2 correctly and there is no error message here, then we want the serial name to display here. So if C32 is blank, indicating they've chosen correctly, then we want our serial name to appear. So this is where we've kind of flipped our algorithm here, and instead of our if being in our false statement, we are actually moving this over into our true statement. So if this is true, now we've got to program in all of the different options to output our cereal choice. So if B32 is equal to C24, then we're going to output D24. And if B32 is equal to a 2, then we're going to output rice checks. And if B32 is equal to 3, which is C26, then we're going to output Cocoa Krispies. And if B32 is equal to C27, then we're going to output Corn Pops. Everything else is going to be Frosted Flakes. And I'm going to close out all of my nested conditions, because remember, this is all based on it being proper. So we don't have to worry about putting a blank in as our last option. But we do need, once we close out all of those if statements, we've got to go back to, because remember, we're in our true statement, so we only go to red here because we still need what happens if it's false. And if it's false, we want this to just be a blank cell. So because I've done a rice checks, or rice checks comes up because I've got a healthy cereal, I've chosen 2, which is healthy, so my name on my cereal pops up. If I choose 4 here, the name of my cereal goes away, and I get my choose again error saying that I did not choose properly. And so that concludes our complicated nested conditionals using both logical and relational operators. So our nested if statements here when a user inputs something, where our ifs are in our false statements, not our true. And then down here, where we start using our logical ors and ands to help us make more complicated if statements based on user choices. Hope you enjoyed this, and rewind as much as you need to get all of your formulas correct.